Next, we will move on to the regular agenda items, beginning with 5A. 5A is the Artisan Scottsdale rezoning, case 3ZN 2021, and number 3DA, Development Agreement 2021. Presenter is Brian Clough, Principal Planner, and then we'll have the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'm Brian Clough with the city's current planning department. I'll be giving you an overview of the applicant's request for Artisan Scottsdale, case 3ZN 2021, as well as 3DA 2021. The specific request this evening from the applicant is to adopt Ordinance 4535 regarding a zoning district map amendment that would be from the central business downtown overlay to the downtown multiple use type 2 plan block development, along with the downtown core type 1 plan block development. It's for a mixed use development that includes 83 dwelling units along with 5,000 square feet of commercial floor area. Additionally, it includes the Artisan Scottsdale development plan and the development agreement referenced in resolution 12397. The subject site we're looking at this evening, highlighted in yellow on the screen, is on the south side of Indian School Road and along Marshall Way. Here's a closer look at the site, west of Marshall Way, south of Indian School Road, and north of First Avenue. Currently, it is a vacant lot that is used for overflow parking. You can see some local area businesses in the area consisting of 1-, 2-, and 3-story buildings. This is the existing zoning on the property, the C2 downtown overlay zoning district. And then the requested zoning with the downtown multiple use type 2 plan block development and downtown overlay over the majority portion of the site. And then this corner over here on the southeast is the downtown core type 1, also with the plan block development downtown overlay. This is the site relative to the Old Town Plan land use table. A closer look of that here shows a portion of the site in the downtown multiple use category, shown in green, and then the southeast portion in the downtown core in blue. This is the Old Town Plan development types map, with a closer look here showing that the property is split between the type 1 and type 2 areas with the blue and the green. This is a look at the proposed site plan for the development, which is on approximately 1.92 gross acre site. It is broken up into 2 buildings, the northern building including about 60 dwelling units, with another 23 in the southern building. Access to the site is provided into a below-grade garage off of First Avenue in this area here. The alley that currently bisects the site will also remain open. A couple items to note: the 83 units come out to approximately 43 dwelling units per acre as far as density goes. There is a 3-level below-grade parking structure that's providing parking for the development. Within that, the city is entering into an agreement with the developer to construct 55 public parking spaces that are proposed to be located on that first below-grade level of the garage. The southern building located here is where the approximate 5,000 square feet of commercial floor area would be. And then I'll also note the applicant is proposing a couple public open space areas, one in this area here at First Avenue and Marshall Way, and then another here at Indian School Road and Marshall Way. This is the proposed landscape plan to go along with the development. To note here, the applicant is constructing new sidewalks surrounding the public streets around the development. On Indian School Road, landscaping and a new 10-foot sidewalk that continues down Marshall Way at a width of 10 feet, and then also on First Avenue. These are the proposed building elevations for the development. On the top is the north elevation, which would be fronting Indian School Road, and on the south is or on the bottom is the southern elevation on First Avenue. The proposed building heights for the northern building is the taller building. It's at approximately 63 feet. That's inclusive of the mechanical equipment and within the 66-foot building height that's allowed within the Type 2 area without modification or bonus requests. And then the southern building here that's on First Avenue in Marshall Way is approximately 52 feet in height. That's inclusive of mechanical equipment and within the 48-foot building height that's allowed in the Type 1 area with an additional 6 feet of mechanical. Here's the additional elevations of the east side fronting on Marshall Way on the top and the west elevation on the bottom. With the request for a plan block development, the applicant can request amended development standards from the standard downtown requirements. With this application, they are requesting one amended development standard, and that has to do with the building location requirements of the downtown district. And because of the curve along Marshall Way and the combination of Type 1 and Type 2 development types, which the red line that you see here illustrates the boundary between Type 1 and Type 2 there. So that creates challenges in complying with those building location requirements due to different setback requirements for those different types. So what the applicant is requesting is to amend that standard to allow a greater setback. Typically in the Type 1 areas on this side would be a minimum requirement of 14 feet, and portions of the building would need to be at that 14 feet. Within the Type 2 area would be a minimum setback of 20 feet. And the applicant's requesting to change those to be minimum setback requirements to allow them to set the building back further in certain circumstances. And you can see what they're proposing here is a minimum setback of 22 feet, which is greater than what would be required. And it would be per the development plan as shown on the screen here. With regard to the development and sale agreement that's included with this request, there are some conveyances that include some city remnant parcels of old right-of-way acquisitions that the developer is proposing to acquire. Also, the city is proposing to require those 55 public parking spaces within the garage and a garage easement to go along with that to provide the public access rights to those parking spaces. There's also construction timing included within the development agreement that addresses construction start times. The applicant would be required to commence construction within 3 years of approval. If they were unable to perform, then the applicant and or the city could initiate a reversion of the zoning back to the zoning prior to approval. Additionally, there is a construction mitigation plan proposed within the development agreement that I'll touch a little bit more on later. It addresses traffic routes, workforce vehicle parking, construction vehicle parking, and that is an exhibit to the development agreement. Or other boards and commissions, this did go before our development review board at their January 20th, 2022 meeting. They forwarded a recommendation of approval with a 5-0 vote. Additionally, it went before our planning commission at their February 23rd, 2022 meeting, and they forwarded a recommendation for approval with a vote of 6-1. They also included a stipulation that recommended inclusion of a construction mitigation plan with the application. Public involvement has involved staff and applicant notifications of our typical 750-foot radius. I believe the applicant also exceeded that radius with their notification. They had an open house meeting February 8th of 2021 and also follow-up after that at multiple times after the initial open house meeting. Comments have been received, several comments both in favor and opposition. Many of the concerns that were brought up by the opposition had to do with traffic, access points, building massing, construction impacts, and parking. And then a little bit more about the construction mitigation plan. More recently, the construction impacts that the project might have on surrounding area businesses has been the focus of concern of a lot of these comments. with emphasis on potential closures on First Avenue, as well as closures or limiting access to the public parking. So as I mentioned before, staff, since Planning Commission has been working closely with the applicant and developer team on drafting up a construction mitigation plan that has been included as Exhibit P1 in the development and sale agreement. And I'll mention the existing plan does not propose any closures to First Avenue or limitation to access of the public parking spaces on First Avenue. However, it does provide for flexibility for the city to make potential modifications to that plan as may be needed for potential public safety or other issues that may arise. Additionally, the applicant has worked with the local area property owners on a private agreement that further restricts some of the items related to the public parking on the street, and the applicant can go into additional detail on that. So in conclusion, just reiteration of the request this evening for the zoning district map amendment ordinance number 4535, as well as the resolution for the development plan and development and sale agreement. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here with a presentation prepared.
Thank you. Whoa. We will move on to the applicant and then open public comment on this case.
Mayor, members of the council, for your record, John Berry, 6750 East Camelback Road in Scottsdale. The Artisan is a pedestrian-friendly gateway to the Arts District. It implements long-held community goals for our city, including the provision of 2 public art plazas and 55 new public underground parking spaces. Now, locating the public parking in this area of downtown was supported by the voters. Now, the city came to us to meet that need. The city recognized that this is a strategic location where businesses and visitors, both south of Indian School Road in the Main Street area and north of Indian School Road, could take advantage of this parking. Now, the city wanted us to build 55 public spaces. Now, they recognize that the private sector can actually build more spaces for less than the public sector can. So the city came to us and said, would you build this for us? We said, sure. Then they said, well, would you maintain these spaces for the public? And we said, well, okay, we'll do that too. And then they came to us and said, well, we want the best location in the underground parking for the public parking garage. And we said, okay, we agreed to that too. And given the city, and we'll build the city, those spaces at the top of the garage closest to the street. Obviously, the taxpayers are benefiting by getting more for less. We also said yes to achieving an important general plan goal. We're doing so with 2 public art plazas that are approximately 10,000 square feet. Again, built and maintained by the builder, not by the city, not by the taxpayers. Again, the taxpayers benefit. At First Avenue and Marshall, we will transform a barren corner into a spectacular and meaningful public open space in our old town. At the very visible corner of Indian School Road and Marshall Way, there will be a new gateway to the Arts District with a very unique feature and a first for the city. In collaboration with the Gallery Association, we will be providing free of charge a window to Main Street at this intersection. What do I mean by that? It will be a space 26 feet by 11 feet that will, in the kind of the parlance of vernacular of marketeers, it will be a teaser space for Main Street and the galleries with display space and a video wall that will attract folks to the galleries and Main Street off of the Indian School and Marshall Way area. Now, staff referenced that we are requesting one amended standard. That amended standard is to move the building further away from the streets. This orange area on both sides of the south building, this orange area is the area where if we did not ask for this amended standard to move the building further away, those orange areas are where the ordinance would allow us to put 4-story buildings closer to those streets. So this building would be larger with a larger footprint. Now, what does this amended development standard mean for the community? A larger public plaza, a smaller building footprint, and a better pedestrian experience. Now, staff noted that we are not asking for any bonus height or density. In the Type 1 area, the base is 54, we're at 52. In the Type 2 area, the base with no bonus is 72 feet, and we're at 64 feet. The density that would be allowed at the base would be 96 residences. We are at 83 residences. The Artisan is over-parked. We have a surplus of 21 spaces. What does that mean? The guest space ratio will go from the required 1 guest space for every 6 residences under your ordinance. With these extra spaces, we'll have 1 guest space for every 2.4 residences. What about traffic? I want you to keep in mind that this property has C2 zoning today that allows a plethora of uses. By right, no city council, no planning commission, straight to DRB. Those uses, compared to the Artisan use you're hearing this evening, those uses in C2 would generate 49%. The Artisan would generate 49% less automobile traffic, but very importantly, more pedestrian traffic. Staff referenced the construction mitigation plan. We listened to the businesses in this area, and I will tell you that I'm not aware of any project that has ever gone this far to do so much to minimize these very important construction impacts to these businesses. And that's been a 3-pronged effort. The first prong is a stipulated, very detailed construction mitigation plan. The second prong, and this is a first in the city, is this off-street parking plan enforcement agreement, which is a private agreement that will be recorded between the builder and area businesses that will ensure that off-street parking is required and utilized for the workforce at this site. And finally, the third prong, something I'm pleased to let you know, is as of last Friday, we actually have signed a lease with a property owner about 500 feet away to the west to use their 16 spaces on that parking lot. Now, in phases 1 and 2 of this, as they build the underground parking structure, there'll be about 20 workers on site. Now, we believe we can accommodate all of those 20 workers on site, but if we can't, then we have 16 spaces 500 feet away for them to utilize. When it comes to phase 3, after the parking garage is built, all of those workers will be able to park in the parking garage, and if for some reason they can't, this plan that we've entered into requires us to go find other off-street parking, additional off-street parking for those workers. Mayor, members of the council, in conclusion, I'd like to talk about some of the community benefits associated with this project. Clearly, the most important one is transforming this vacant eyesore into an oasis with 2 public art plazas of about 10,000 square feet. No request for additional height or density. The single amended development standard moving the building further away from the street to the benefit of the public. An investment of approximately $40 million in our old town. Less traffic than the existing zoning uses that could go there today. New 10-foot shaded sidewalks to enhance pedestrian comfort. We implement the city's sensitive design principles as well as their urban design and architectural guidelines. There is a substantial public art contribution. We are over-parked. Talking about parking, This is a substantial benefit to the tune of about $1 million today to the taxpayers. The city came to us and said, we'll pay you $1 less than the $40,000 that it would cost us at the time when we entered into this to build these parking spaces for you and for the public. Well, as of early this year, the cost to build those spaces is now close to $60,000 a space. We went to the city and said, well, geez, costs have gone up. This, we don't want to, would you be willing to like maybe meet us part of the way and not have us absorb the new cost, the high increased construction cost like they talked about at the Prado del Sol? No. The city said, no, we think that this would be something that would be a good thing for you to do. We said, okay, we agreed to do it. Now the challenge is that's about $1 million based on the cost of those parking spaces today that we have agreed to do for the city, along with maintaining those spaces. Now I would bet you dollars to donut that between the time of this hearing and if it's approved and when this starts construction, I don't think those costs are going down. And we will be required to stick with the $39,999 price to deliver those parking spaces to the public and then maintain them for you. We talked about the efforts we've gone through to deal with the concerns about construction mitigation, all very valid concerns for these area businesses. We have done so. We will be reducing the urban heat island effect. We will be more than doubling the amount of trees on this site. Short-term rentals are prohibited. As staff noted, we're stipulated to commence construction within 3 years. We have this unique and first collaboration with the Gallery Association to provide this teaser window to try and attract people down to the galleries off of the busy Indian School Road and Marshall Way intersection. The regional office for this builder, for my client, the regional office will be on site. There will be pride and eyes on this development. We are creating, very importantly, a long-time goal of this council and of this community to create meaningful Old Town public open space. Mayor, members of the council, we are pleased to be here with the staff recommendation for approval. We've worked very hard for that. They have been very tough on us, and we're pleased to be here with the recommendation for approval. We are here with a unanimous recommendation for approval from your DRB and a Planning Commission recommendation for approval on a 6-1 vote. Members of the council, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or wait until after public testimony. And I would note, I got this done with 3 seconds to spare. I'm going to charge double for that, but I got it done with three seconds to spare. So thank you.
Okay, we do have one hand up from Councilmember Durham, but I do also have 7 people for public testimony or comment. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor. How can you ensure or guarantee that that first level of parking is going to be reserved for the general public and not used by tenants of the buildings?
Mayor Ortega, Council Member Durham, that was a question that arose early on when we met with some of the businesses in the area, and we've been meeting with them for, gosh, 1.5 years. I don't know how long it's been. And the way we addressed that was a very expensive solution, but we think it works very well. There is a separate elevator core and a separate stairwell that is dedicated just to that first floor of public parking. That elevator core does not take you into the building. The stairwell does not take you into the building. There is a separate private elevator core for the bottom 2 levels where tenants and guests park. And interestingly, that elevator that takes you into the building does not stop at the public parking level. Neither do the stairs open up into that level. So we have a true bifurcation of the access for somebody who wants to use the public level and still somehow get into the building. So we've tried to discourage that as much as possible. The other thing I would note is that we have excess guest parking on site. So we have substantially more guest parking than required by the ordinance. 1 guest parking space for every 6 residences is your ordinance requirement. We're 21 spaces over. With those excess parking spaces, we will be at 1 guest parking space for every 2.4 residences. Again, we're providing even more parking than you all approved last year for a requirement for guest parking. So we think in combination of those, that level of public parking will, to the greatest extent we can control, be truly public parking.
Thank you.
Well, very good. We will move to public comment. Oh, wait, I have one question for you, Ms. Berry. You use the word mixed use, and actually less than 1% of the built space is for office, I believe, and or other commercial use. So it seems like over 99% of it is residential, yet the term mixed use, how do you justify that?
Mayor Ortega, members of the council, we actually, on the ground level, which seems to be where the community will interact with this building, is on the ground level with the street. With the 2 public plazas that we're providing, we think that is a significant benefit to the public. And the idea of that ground level mixed use is to activate the street, is to create vibrancy and interest in something that attracts pedestrians. You don't have a dead space along the pedestrian ways, so you want to attract people back and forth with activity and vibrancy. That's what those 2 public art plazas do. Additionally, the units, the residences along Indian School Road will actually open up to the sidewalk. So they will have a door and a patio on Indian School Road. So that also activates the Indian School Road frontage. As to the ground level of this building, again, where the interaction occurs and where we want that sense of pedestrian activity and vibrancy, which is eyes on the street, safety. I would note that across the street this morning at the city's what's that? Falls Park, or Falls, what is it called? The Horseshoe Falls, thank you very much. That was not a lucky answer with the horseshoe. So Horseshoe Falls Park, I unfortunately noticed, and was, terrible to witness, but, 2 homeless people that were utilizing that as their abode, which was too bad. But I would also note on the ground level here, 64% of the ground level of this building is non-residential use. So I think we've tried to address that ground level. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Next, we will move to some public comment. We have Jimmy Erickson and then Sonny Kirtley.
Mayor, City Council, my name is Jimmy Erickson. I've been a custom jeweler. Am I doing something wrong?
If you could move over a little bit to the mic or move there, that's better.
Are you sure? Okay. I've been a custom jeweler in Old Town Scottsdale for 39 years. I've been in 4 locations. I was on Fifth Avenue, I was on Goldwater, and I was on Marshall Way. And I had to move from each location because there was no parking. No parking, no parking. 26 years ago, I bought the property right across the street because there would be parking there, and there has been. But now we're facing a problem again. There's going to be no parking. All the people on First Avenue, the 14 businesses, we're destination shops. We are not people who walk down the street and walk into our store. Never happened. In 26 years, I've never had one person ever walk into my store and say, "Hi, I was walking down the street. What do you do?" No. All the people that come in, they know what I want. They know what they do. This is the same for me. This is the same for Jim Sudol, Ceramic Arts. This is the same for the other people on the block. We are destinations. And in order to be a destination shop, we must have parking. If we don't have parking, most of my ladies who come to me are 60, 70 years old. They're not going to park in underground parking. That's nuts. They want to park in front of our shops and walk in the door. We take care of them. They get in their car, and they drive home. And that's a big problem. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I plan to do it another 10 to 15 years. But in order to do it, I need to have people find a place to park. And this is a disaster parking situation. Now, I think it's going to be easy with underground parking. Most people don't like underground parking. I hate it myself. I don't want to park underground. What a horrible thing. Most ladies don't like underground parking. That's even worse. So no, it's not a good idea. And trying to talk to making this pedestrian walkway, that's crazy. The Scottsdale did this 30 years ago when they changed the location of Marshall Way. I was on the Marshall Way retail association at that time, and it was going to make it so much easier. We're going to have all the people from the Marshall Way Art Walk to Main Street. You know what? It never happened. My window and my bench face the curved street. There's nobody ever walking it. That's just a goofy idea that somebody thought about years ago, and it didn't work. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. You're going to put this building right across from only my business, but my home. I built my home there. I've lived there for 14 years. And now I get to wake up every morning with all these people going in and out of their driveway? You've got to be kidding me. It should be, the entrance to the property, if you approve it, should be on Marshall Way. Definitely not First Avenue, because if you put it on First Avenue, you're going to kill all the businesses. You might as well just shoot us all now, because we're not going to have any businesses because there's not going to be a place to park. That's a big problem. So you got to stop this now before it gets started. Or otherwise, I'm out of business, Jim Sudol's out of business, David Michael Miller's out of business, Valerie Ann's out of business. I could go on and list the number of people that are out of business, but it's just going to be the way it is. So you got to stop it. If you don't approve it, you approve John Barry. Okay, I know John Barry. Yeah, great. Going to build something great. But you can't ruin the people that have been there a long time. It's just not fair. Most of the people on our street have been there 10, 20, 30 years or more, and now it's going to be all dead. Why?
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Sonny Kirtley, and then Danielle Pomasi.
I don't know where we are on the clock, but good evening or good afternoon, Mayor Ortega, council members. My name is Sonny Kirtley. I am here representing the COGS Coalition in Greater Scottsdale Board of Directors, and our address is on file. COGS supports the construction mitigation plan negotiated by the area merchants and owners with the John Barry and Artisan team. The inclusion of an emergency-only closure by the city is a critical amendment to that document. We particularly appreciate the respect the Artisan team has demonstrated toward the businesses and to understand the severe negative impact on a closed public street to the livelihood of those businesses. Looking ahead to the future, COGS will strongly support a City Council directive to staff to draft a city-wide construction mitigation plan. There are many, many cities that already have this as an example for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Danielle Pomasi, and then Marilyn Atkinson.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I do have a map here. I don't know if someone can turn this Elmo on. There we go. Let's go this way. My name is Danielle Pomisel, and I reside at 7607 East Minnesota Avenue in Scottsdale. Alvin Yono, the owner of 4 parcels on First Avenue, 7007, 7015, 7025, and 7029, all across the street from the proposed artisan, cannot be here tonight because he is ill. I wanted to read his letter for the record since he's a significant property owner in the area. Dear Mayor and council members, as a nearby property owner on First Avenue, I'm writing to ask for your support for the Artisan Scottsdale project located at Indian School in Marshall. The Artisan will add to the vibrancy of the Arts District with a wonderful mix of uses that are needed in this area of Scottsdale. This corner is an important one for our city and deserves to be more than a dirt lot. A sensitive and appropriate development such as this one is welcomed for this area. I urge you to support this project. Sincerely, Alvin Yono. You should have a copy of this letter at your seat, along with a copy of a letter of support from the Coach House, which is immediately adjacent to the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Marilyn Atkinson, and then Bob Penchman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to talk about the mitigation plan. This is something that needs to be done in all of the areas. Matter of fact, all of Scottsdale. I have property that's in historic Old Town on Brown Avenue. We will be coming to you, I'm sure, down the road shortly to push forward a mitigation plan. Parking is key to survival of business owners. You cannot survive without parking. We already have a shortage of parking in the downtown. If construction vehicles take over an area, where are they going to park? How are the merchants going to succeed in their businesses? Because you're not getting in the customers that you have. If those of you were in the downtown during the season, you've noticed, and I've noticed even now, our season has run late. There are still people coming. There are still a lot of people on the street. One of the folks mentioned parking underground. Parking underground sounds great, but we have proof already. We can say, oh, Fashion Square has that. They're a whole different animal. We have at the Buckboard Trail parking lot, no, I'm sorry, at the Parking Corral parking lot underground, and it's not used. It hasn't been used. It's been there for years. So we do support always a mitigation plan for each individual area and for parking off-site. We hope that the council takes this into consideration and even considers it for a public citywide ordinance, because it has to, or mitigation plan of some time. We have to protect what we have. And I thank you very much, and my address is on record.
Thank you, Marilyn. And next we have Bob Pedgman and Susan Wood. Susan Wood signed up. She offered her time to Bob Pedgman, so we'll make it clock it at 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Ortega, council members. The name is Bob Pedgman. The address is on the record. And most Old Town business owners don't oppose development in Old Town. But when a development gets this close to the heart of a shopping area, where it can have a negative impact on the local businesses, that's where the problem starts. As a point of reference, when the canopy was built, because it had plenty of staging area, not one merchant complained about construction mitigation or construction adverse effect. So I want to put that into perspective. Specifically on First Avenue, they have a major parking issue right now. And for people who say, you know, it's all a bunch of hyperbole and exaggeration, the gravel lot today that the Artisan will be built on is being used for parking overflow. So on First Avenue, not only are most of the street spaces usually taken, there's major overflow. That gravel lot is being used as an overflow lot for a nearby restaurant, a nearby bar who happens to support this. And at times there are 40, 50, 60, 70 or more cars parked there. That lot obviously goes away. And it's a private lot. It's not the developer's fault. It just goes away. That's just fact. But that's more reason why we are concerned about preserving as many of the street spaces as possible during the construction. Now, let me just put this on the projector here. This is an example of that lot, for example, that the Artisan will be built on. Cars are trying to make it to it, and they'd have to wait for space. Here's another example, just to show you how how short the parking is in that area. Now, for a large construction like this, there are usually two categories of negative adverse effect on local businesses. One of it is that construction vehicles can park, and large crews of construction vehicles, up to 50 maybe, would park on the surrounding streets. And the other one is that the streets can be closed off by the city for public parking. The first piece of that has been addressed through a private agreement between the business owners and the developer. And there is a private agreement. John Barry said it's going to be a public record. I'm happy to report that this agreement has now been signed in a short 3 days by 43 local businesses. That's how concerned they are about this. But this agreement basically, all it does is that the developer commits that the construction vehicles will be parked off-site and not on specific streets and parking lots in the area. And by the way, the city could have easily entered into this agreement with the developer directly. They chose not to. As a last resort, we entered into the agreement. But there's still one key piece left that has to be addressed, and that is the city keeping the parking spaces open. Let me put this on the slide projector. 2 blocks west of that construction site, of the Artisan construction site, this is a similarly, maybe a larger size construction. The city has allowed all of the parking spaces, every single one of them, to be blocked off so the public can't park on it. They have construction material, and to me, this is picking winners and losers. The developer is the winner, obviously, in this case, because they have all this use of this space, the same parking spaces that these local merchants rely on, by the way, for their customers. We cannot allow this to happen on First Avenue. Now, there is a construction mitigation plan that's attached to the development agreement. But we need concrete language, because Brian Clough, he mentioned that this is flexibility. This is what flexibility looks like, by the way. This is the visual of flexibility. To guard against this, we need just a one-line language that says that the street spaces on and around the Artisan shall remain open to public use, except if there's a case of an emergency, and to me, emergency is a crane is falling, there's a sewer leakage, not an ongoing 3-year condition like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have French Thompson, and then Mr. David Michael Miller.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Caputi, City Council members, my name is French Thompson. I live, my business is 7148 East Main Street, Scottsdale. I've got a little thing to put on the screen also. This is a simple sentence that we'd like to have added to this agreement. Very short little thing. But what it does is it says if we're going to close off any streets, public streets, citizen streets, streets we've all paid for, taxes, they're only given to the developer for an emergency, only for an emergency. As you saw in the photographs that Mr. Pejman put up here, the city has given away an entire block, an entire city block of public property to a private developer to put their construction materials on, to put their cranes. There's 4 restaurants right across the street from that all of their parking has been taken away from them on the street. That's my street. That's your street. The city's paid for it. The citizens have paid for that. This is just a simple sentence to be added to say if the city has to come along and close the street for any reason, it's going to be an honest-to-God emergency. You just don't give away public property to developers for their own private use. This has been going on for 2 years. I mean, that's literally, I can't even believe the city's doing this. And I hope the city looks into why this developer's been able to use that whole entire one city block for their construction material and do something about it and prevent this from happening in the future. This isn't the kind of thing that you do to your merchants. I mean, there should be good development that comes in. Artisan is a good example of that. They want to watch out for the businesses. They want to watch out for the merchants. They want to be a good citizen. They don't want to have a negative impact on our businesses. They would like our businesses to be there so that when they're open and they have residents and business there, that they can enjoy us. So we're a mutually beneficial situation. But if you're closing off streets that, by the way, it's probably been 5 years that I come up here and say, parking. I feel like walking up here one day and just say for 3 minutes, parking. But that 1 minute of silence was probably the same thing. So I just implore you to add this simple language to this agreement. If they need to close the street, it's a real emergency. Thank you very much. John, I beat you. I got 12 seconds.
Thank you. We have one last speaker, David Michael Miller.
Mayor, Council. My name is David Michael Miller. I own and operate an interior design studio on First Avenue at 7034 East First Avenue. The Artisan project will be immediately at my east property boundary and will be directly behind me across the alley. I have the distinct misfortune of being in this position. I'm going to put this on the screen if I can. So this building right here, this white streak, that's my building. It was designed by Wendell Burnett. It was completed in the year 2000. At the time, I built it to the maximum allowed height of 30 feet. I enjoy a second floor office that looks out over the roofs of the stores across the street on Indian School. With the Artisan in place, being 60 feet, out my back window, out my private office window, I'll be looking directly into somebody's living room. My building is 30 feet, the Artisan is 60 feet. I don't think that this bulk and mass and height belongs on First Avenue. Also, looking right next door to my building, you can see where I have my customer parking. It's a gray splotch there to the right of the white roof. So for the Artisan, I'm going to be right next door to all the ingress and egress of parking into the Artisan. According to the traffic study from the city, there are going to be 650 ins and outs into the parking a day. So my luxury home clients that I'm bringing to my office are going to be sitting in line waiting for people to go in and out of the Artisan. 650 moving cars a day right next door to me. That's bothersome. So the effect of the project to me is going to leave me in a canyon of building mass. And I think it's very unfortunate for the city, for First Avenue in general, to have to suffer this. I understand the building's promoted as being fantastic and, the belt buckle of the arts community. But I think this amount of mass and bulk does not belong on this street. In addition, when I was first presented this project by the developer's representatives, I was told that everyone up and down First Avenue, all my neighbors supported it unanimously, which I found hard to believe. They said, "We came to you last because we knew you were going to be the toughest sell." So at the time the project was presented, I thought this is a moving locomotive that I have no power in altering the speed of. But following that presentation, I went and I talked to all my neighbors, and none of my neighbors were for it. So there's something wrong with this community outreach problem that brings back information to council that everybody in the neighborhood is all gung-ho for this to land on First Avenue, when that is clearly not the case. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. And I'll ask the applicant to come up if there's anything to add or respond to.
Mayor, members of the council, first off, I do want to thank the merchants in the area that have taken the time to work with us as we work together to try and address these issues. I think we need to step back for a second because a lot of the issues have focused on parking and the availability of parking and access onto First Avenue for the garage. And I think we need to step back and remember that this property is a vacant piece of property that has certain property rights associated with it and certain zoning category associated with it, which is the C2 zoning category, which means that someone today going straight to DRB can build some of those uses in C2, which would include some very successful restaurants, which could include a 48-foot tall office building, which would have underground parking by right. So the existing zoning allows substantial uses that would access directly First Avenue. What our traffic analysis does show is that those C2 uses would generate more traffic than what we're proposing. In fact, the Artisan generates 49% less traffic. So if the number 650 a day for residential use sounds high, I want you to increase that by 50%, which are the types of traffic counts that you would have from successful restaurants, offices, and other C2 uses. Now, the property today, again, by right, here is First Avenue, has 2 existing curb cuts onto First Avenue, and they have the right to use those today. I will tell you that our client did not like the idea of access onto First Avenue. We didn't like it. In fact, we submitted 2 plans, including one time with the concurrence of Mr. Miller, with the access continuing to be on the alley. And it wasn't until the city staff and the transportation staff, in no uncertain terms, told us that that would be a traffic nightmare and a liability waiting to happen for both the city and the developer. And they had a list of issues as to why we should not have access off the alleyway. We didn't want to believe them. We had 2 meetings with staff. At our second meeting with transportation staff, we brought our traffic engineer. For those of you that think that traffic engineers are shills for developers and will give you any answer you pay them to give, wrong. Their professional licenses are on the line, just like architects. Lawyers, okay, but engineers, architects are different. When our traffic engineer joined that meeting with transportation staff, she walked out and she said, they are absolutely right. I will not seal a plan that has access off of the alleyway. They're right, in spite of the efforts of the community and ourselves to try and convince staff to the opposite. So we conceded that that was the right thing to do, to take access off of First Avenue. I will also tell you that there's another reason that you probably don't want access off the alleyway for public parking. If we're going to continue to have public parking there, I want you to look at and get familiar with another situation where you have public parking off an alleyway. This is Main Street, this is Marshall, this is the Museum of the West. This is the access off of an alleyway into the underground parking for Museum of the West. I can't tell you the number of times I get complaints. I can't imagine the complaints you all get or staff gets. I didn't even know there was public parking there. Would you put some type of giant blimp up there with an arrow flashing down that says public parking here? Because you don't know it's there. If we collectively are going to invest this amount of money in underground public parking, let's make sure it's accessible and visible for the people that can use it. Mayor, members of the council, I think those are the kind of global issues that I heard about traffic and access. As the construction mitigation, boy, we have done everything possible on the private sector side to address construction mitigation, and we're very proud of it. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Good. So I see Councilwoman Whitehead as a comment or question, and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, thank you, all the parties involved and the public speakers. It is always hard when a privately owned open space is developed, and that's what is going on here. I just want to thank the merchants, too, who have been tirelessly involved in this process for a year, and of course, the development team. So I think this project has a lot of my favorite new normals. So we have the performance contract, so we're not just handing off zoning changes. We're actually going to have the project built in 3 years. That's very good. This is a project that will get built if approved. More robust landscaping plan, more trees, public open space, and pedestrian connectivity. So those are, well, and higher design standards. So that's, thank you, Jeff. So that is the new normal, which I really support. But this project offers many firsts, which I'm really excited about. And a lot of us have been involved in this. So the public-private parking conundrum, we've seen it fail on a number of parking garages. So I brought that to the attention, and others did, to this development team. 2 different elevators and 2 different stairwells. That is an investment in our community, and that will ensure that public parking spaces paid for with tax dollars actually are open for the public. So that is a huge new first. The collaboration, and I should thank the city manager. Good negotiating. Sorry the price went up, guys. So collaboration with the gallery district. We're an arts town. And so I love the new concept. And I'm not sure where this came from, I guess after a year of working with art galleries and other businesses, the window to Main Street. So again, this is privately owned property that will feature local art and will bring people into our arts district. I think this is exactly the type of project we want. And I want to point out, too, that it is perhaps higher than some people would like, and I appreciate that, but it's a mid-rise, it's barely a mid-rise project. We're looking at smaller projects that are unique and upscale and bring something different to our downtown, so this is definitely a fit there. And finally, the construction mitigation plan, another first. And I should point out that the parking, again, the parking code has been changed and increased because of input from our businesses. So this not only meets the parking code, but exceeds it. But now we have a construction mitigation plan, which honestly is good for the developer and the businesses. It's great that we're investing in our downtown. It's great that we're going to have these really fabulous new projects, and we're going to have residents that are 24/7 and new visitors and new businesses. But 3 years of construction, that's a long time, and we've seen this in I've certainly seen in other downtowns where it's just a mess. And really, we have the space and we have the ability to have construction parking somewhere other than our public streets. And this development team has been incredibly generous working with us. So a couple firsts. We have the construction vehicles, an agreement, a private agreement, where the construction vehicles will not be on those public street parking spots. That's pretty cool. And we have a developer that has actually gone under contract with a private parking lot in case there is overflow. That's a first. And we do have this city agreement that will prevent closure of public streets. And I do want to talk about the request of one of the speakers. Anyway, these are all firsts. I'm really excited about it. I support the project. I do want to ask staff about adding some language, because we have seen, I know the street that was in the picture is just completely closed off. It seems to me that the verbiage provided to us by French Thompson is fine, but I would want to add, just basically, and I think this is what the city has in mind, but it's okay to put it in writing, is just that these parking spaces and the street itself will not be closed off unless there's an emergency or a hazardous condition. So maybe that's something staff wants to address. But other than that, I'm very grateful to the businesses that were involved. I do think some changes were made by even those, by the input from businesses that still don't support the project, but I think it's a great project overall. Thank you.
Okay, I see council. City attorney has some comments probably in response to Councilwoman Whitehead, and then I have Councilwoman Littlefield, and I have a couple questions for the applicant as well. City attorney and Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilwoman Whitehead. I just want to clarify that the construction mitigation plan and the proposed development agreement do provide that the public street and the public parking will remain open. I think what the complaint from the citizens that you heard from tonight was there is a provision in the construction mitigation plan and in the development agreement that does allow city staffs, particularly the city manager, some flexibility to make some changes to the construction mitigation plan if need be. But it's not full or complete discretion. That discretion is limited to changes that are reasonably necessary. And let me read the exact provision. The city manager or designee shall have the authority to make adjustments to the construction mitigation plan as may be reasonably necessary to accommodate any health, safety, or public interest concern that may arise during construction. And again, I believe the citizens you heard from really would prefer it be restricted further to an emergency. And I heard a falling crane mentioned as an example. I think it's important for the council and the public and the citizens who are concerned to understand the city has a non-delegable duty to keep its right-of-way reasonably safe. We have to have the ability to navigate and manage our right-of-way because we have the responsibility to do that. And that's why the city has been reluctant to put in the construction mitigation plan that only emergencies, current emergency, and not a foreseeable problem or risk or issue, can be addressed. I do think that council should consider the implications to doing that and the disputes that can arise about whether or not a true emergency is present if the construction mitigation plan were deviated from. So I do think some of it has been addressed in the private agreement, but I wanted the council to understand why the wording and the construction mitigation plan is the way it is, and more importantly, to understand what the wording is, because it is there. It's just slightly more broad than what the citizens were suggesting.
Thank you. I have another question about that. So it does seem like just there's different words with similar meanings. What is defined as public interest?
I think that is left to the reasonable discretion of the city manager. But my thought would be it's not just for the developer's convenience. And I'll let the city manager or staff that worked on this mitigation plan comment if they would like. But it's not just for the developer's convenience. It's also, if you're seeing a big traffic jam, maybe we need to do something about that. That's in the public interest. So you're taking the good of more citizens over the wishes of a few, and you're weighing that, balancing as it moves forward. You can imagine if there's a big traffic jam, eventually that's going to cause a problem, and that could potentially cause a health safety problem. But when in time does that arise? I think that you have to leave it to the technical staff who manage the right-of-way to figure that out. Because, as we all know, construction is a dynamic situation, and it's hard to plan for every contingency. And at the end of the day, the city is responsible for its right-of-way and responsible to the public for its right-of-way, the public using the right-of-way, not just the developer who's also using the right-of-way, not just the business owners, and we always try to be very sensitive to them when there's construction, but to everybody who is using that right-of-way. And I can't tell you how many complaints and claims we get in every week, every month, when there's an accident on our right-of-way, and it seems pretty clear to at least the legal department that those are accidents caused by private individuals, but the city is always blamed. So we have to really be very careful about how we're managing our right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. I'll listen to what my colleagues say. Yeah, I agree. And in fact, the example you gave seems to me the argument that the street would be open because you're trying not to allow traffic jams. So, okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Littlefield, and then Vice Mayor Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And I hate to tell you, ma'am, but they're not going to stop complaining no matter what we do. So that's not an issue. I like this project. The project has a lot of very positive features to it. And however, I want to address the issue of the insuring of the construction project, which will take at least 3 years and does not negatively impact the surrounding businesses. It is my understanding the developer has agreed to an off-site parking agreement that requires him to park the construction vehicles off-site so that the streets and the roads can remain open for the businesses in the area. I believe that's a first in Scottsdale, and I certainly hope it's not a last. So thank you very much for that. However, the second mitigation issue, and I believe this is also what Councilwoman Whitehead was concerned about, is not completely solved with this plan. The city, too, has to commit to keeping the on-site parking spaces open during the anticipated 3-year construction period, unless some unforeseen emergency occurs. Many of the merchants do not believe their businesses can survive during 3 years of construction that this project will require without an on-street parking access to their businesses. And I agree, and it is not the business of this council or of the city to close down our very well-known and very profitable businesses. These can be solved easily, this problem, I believe, by adding a simple sentence to paragraph 610, page 144 of the council report to state, and this is a quote, "The city shall not close or block off the on-street parking spaces on First Avenue, Marshall, south of First Avenue, and Main Street during the construction, except in cases of emergency, per the definition of emergency in the city's ordinance code 47-2. This definition reads, in Scottsdale Code of Ordinances, section 47-2, definition emergency means a sudden, unexpected event that may create an imminent risk of injury or death to any person or imminent risk to public health, to safety, requiring immediate response. This is a rational and reasonable definition that everybody can understand. And it should also include, or we could consider including, that any hazard to public health and safety should be considered a part of the risk of the public health and safety as defined in this code and ordinance section 47-2. Many of the merchants in the area still fear, as you can tell tonight, that their businesses will close. They and I do not believe they should survive, or they could survive, the 3 years of construction that this project will take without an on-street parking access to their business, and I have to agree with them. It's unreasonable to expect otherwise. Therefore, I would like to move that we amend this contract to include the above definition as stated as part of the city's traffic mitigation plan for this contract. This motion will bring this contract in line with the city's own definitions of emergencies, and it would greatly relieve the minds of most of our business owners that work and own businesses in this downtown area. Thank you.
Okay, I heard a request for a motion, and I didn't hear a second. We have continued discussion at this point. Vice Mayor, did someone second that? I'm sorry.
This is Councilwoman Janik. I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. I did hear a second. Any discussion on the motion? When I looked at that text, by the way, it said the city shall not do it, close it off. Shouldn't it say the city developer or contractor shall not? Okay, I'm just listening to you, but it says the city won't close it off. We're not building the project, right? I don't know how that wording could be more explanatory. It says the city will not, or I believe is.
Well, I believe that the contract that the developer has created for us with this project covers their part of keeping the parking lots open and the parking spaces open, that they have agreed to do that. But the other half of the equation is the city, and the city keeping the parking lots and the parking facilities open. And so that is what I am trying to address, is our obligation as part of a contract. If it's hazardous, if there's a danger to people, obviously, then whoever is designated to make those decisions, be it the city manager or whoever, they would come in and say, hey, we've got to move this stuff out. But I believe that the contractor has already agreed to this.
I just want to get a clarification, as far as, because it makes it sound like the city is taking the action. City Attorney, do you have just some clarification for so far?
Just trying to help with the motion so that everybody understands what it is. In my interpretation, and please correct me, Councilwoman Littlefield, if I'm wrong, you are trying to change the wording in 6.10 with your amendment, 6.10 of the development agreement. Change it from this wording: the city manager or designee shall have the authority to make adjustments to the construction mitigation plan as may be reasonably necessary to accommodate any health, safety, or public interest concerns that may arise during construction. You want to change that sentence to: the city manager or designee shall have the authority to make adjustments to the construction mitigation plan as may be reasonably necessary to accommodate any emergency as defined by section, and I forgot the section number that you listed.
Yeah.
Section number
47, the ordinance, to follow the city's ordinance. What my statement was the city shall not close or block off the on-street parking spaces on First Avenue, Marshall, south of First Avenue, and Main Street during the construction, except in cases of emergency as per the definition of emergency in the city's ordinance code 47.2. And that definition reads, in the city's code of ordinances 47-2 definition, emergency means a sudden unexpected event that may create an imminent risk or injury of death to any person or imminent risk to the public health or safety requiring immediate response. That is a rational and reasonable definition, I believe, and it would include any hazard to the public health and safety, be considered part of the risk to the public health and safety as defined in our code and ordinance of 47-2. It just brings the two together into the same wording and the same definitions as we currently have in the ordinance.
Yes, thank you. I think the problem is, and what the mayor was trying to sort out, is the construction mitigation plan has in numerous places in it that the developer will not, and the city will not obstruct the parking or the street. And so I think to make your motion, really, it is to change the wording of 6.10, the sentence about, take out the wording where it states any health, safety, or public interest concerns, and add any emergency as defined by Scottsdale City Ordinance that may arise during construction.
That's fine.
I would offer that as a clarification of your motion, and I hope I got that correct. I think I do.
I'm trying to bring the two into total alignment, and yes, I would be happy with that change, adjustment, whatever, yeah.
Thank you. I also just wanted to tie it together. If there's any other free legal advice, oh wait, did you have any comment? Okay, so you can sit down, I think. Mr. Berry, unless you had some comment. Otherwise,
I'm sorry, Mayor Ortega, I thought you said you had some questions for me, which is why.
Oh, excuse me. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to vote on the motion, and that clarified it for me as well. So I appreciate that. So at this point, we have a requested amendment with a second, and it's clarified for the record that all the other provisions have not changed. It was just this part. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. Vice Mayor Caputi, Councilmember Durham, Councilwoman Whitehead.
And Councilwoman Janik.
Okay, so we're not voting on the motion on the floor. We're going to continue conversation. Great. I actually had the pleasure to chair the Development Review Board when this project was brought through, and so I feel very strongly about this project, and like the rest of us, I've spent a lot of time on it, and so I have several comments that I want to make. This is a great project. We've all seen why. It replaces a vacant dirt lot with mixed-use options downtown and fulfills the goals of our general plan and our Old Town Character Area Plan. It's in a growth area, and they are not asking for additional height or density. It provides infrastructure improvements, cultural contributions, pocket parks, customers for our downtown merchants, and more than abundant parking. We always try to balance the benefits of new projects with our existing businesses. We fought hard to get 55 extra public parking spaces built with $2.2 million of our taxpayer money above our recently increased parking requirements to make sure that our local businesses, who we greatly value, have more than enough parking. Without the Artisan, we get none of these things. This is a project that I feel is worthy of our city. I don't hear anyone saying that this isn't a great project. It seems to be delayed because of concerns about construction impacts on the area, which to me have been addressed. We all pay for public parking, and the public has a legal right to use it. A creative solution has been devised for this project between the developer and private citizens, but this is not meant for all situations. The city cannot overreach into a private construction project. As our city attorney pointed out, when things go wrong, this could mean serious legal exposure for our city. And local businesses asking for personal use of public parking is a slippery slope, in my opinion, that could be considered a gifting of public funds. The city also cannot be stripped of the authority and regulatory powers to make adjustments to the plan, again, as our city attorney has pointed out. We have to balance the needs of all of our 250,000 residents, and we have to be able to change the plan as needed for health, safety, and other public interest concerns. We have a duty to keep our streets safe, and we can't delegate this to a third party. People that aren't parties to the city contract shouldn't be dictating the terms of our city contracts. That is a dangerous practice. Construction in our city is inevitable. and it will cause temporary disruptions. A construction mitigation plan is a fantastic idea, and it is nothing new in our city. We have extensive rules, policies, and guidelines that manage all of our construction projects. These are in both our city code and our design standards and policy manual. The DS&PM, which everyone might not be familiar with, and I actually brought with me today, I asked staff for a copy. You can see it's large and thick and heavy. Extensively covers construction mitigation. It's a regularly updated and citizen-reviewed plan. We're not just suddenly inventing the idea of construction mitigation. Good suggestions and negotiation always make our projects better. This is a dirt lot in a vibrant part of our city. Something is going to get built here, and we are risking losing all of these great things that we've heard about tonight in order to score political points. We want construction mitigation, I agree. We don't want construction annihilation. New investment re-energizes this area, which benefits all of our businesses. We want more people walking our streets. That helps our existing businesses. Most importantly, state law requires, and we see this in every packet we get, that we consider the aspects of a development plan that would affect the cost of construction of housing. Creating extra layers of unnecessary and redundant bureaucracy and red tape actually prolongs the pain and expense of a project. Forcing a business to implement an additional construction plan, preventing them from using available public parking, and managing their procurement and labor processes drives up the costs and opens up our city to lawsuits. There should always be a balance between the obligations of the city to protect its residents and businesses and the rights of private entities to engage and compete in free market activities. This is capitalism. Government is here to ensure and protect our freedoms, and as was pointed out tonight, not to pick winners and losers. This is a great project. I think the lasting benefits far outweigh the short-term inconveniences, and I am in full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Durham, and then Councilwoman Whitehead and Councilwoman Janik. Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't understand how this emergency provision is going to work, because looking at some of the pictures here, there are a number of parking spaces on the north side of First Avenue immediately adjacent to the project. And maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine how cars could be parked in these spots on the north side of First Avenue that are immediately adjacent to where the project and the construction is going to be. And in some of the pictures we've seen, there are cranes beside the project that are sort of parked on the street, parked in what appears to be parking spaces on the street. And I'm sure that, I imagine that would be necessary in this project. Again, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know that that's an emergency if you've got to park a crane in what would be one of these parking spaces on the north side of the street. I can't see how that would be an emergency. So unless I'm wrong in some of these issues, I think I would prefer to leave this to the discretion of the city. As was discussed, the city's responsible for keeping these right-of-ways open to the maximum extent possible. And I just think this emergency provision, unless I'm misunderstanding something here, I just think it's unworkable. And could you address that, Mr. Berry, on what the intention is of the parking along the north side of First Avenue there, adjacent to the project?
Mayor, Councilmember Durham, excuse me, if I could just highlight that construction mitigation plan is 3 pages of very small print and 2 graphics. But let me just use one of these graphics, which talks about phase 2. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. So what you will note, and it's hard to read, I apologize, is that the crane, unlike that other project on Main Street that Mr. Pejman showed the picture of, our crane will actually be interior to the site. So we won't have a crane on the exterior of the site. So the crane will be on the interior of the site. The construction mitigation plan, as stipulated and is in your packet, requires that we cannot close those parking spaces on First Avenue, on the north side or south side of First Avenue. In fact, what we must do is ensure that those parking spaces are not closed. We can't put lay-down materials or storage materials there. And given the location of the crane and this temporary delivery area off of Marshall Way, my client is very confident that they will not need to close any of those parking spaces anywhere on First Avenue, much less those on the north side. So every construction site is different. So the one you saw on Main Street with that photo, that's a very different parking site contextually than this. We have the advantage of being able to locate the crane on the interior of the site because we're building that underground parking structure. So the crane will be located there, and then it has the reach to be able to take the materials and deliver it on site without having to take up these parking spaces. So that has nothing to do with whether it's an emergency or not, but it just wanted to clarify the availability of those parking spaces on First Avenue, both north and south. The construction mitigation plan requires us to ensure that they stay open. Whether it's an emergency or not, that's your guys' conversation currently.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. If it's possible and feasible, and I know that's what the construction mitigation plan says, I was curious about how that was possible to have parked cars in such close proximity to a construction site. And if that's possible and feasible, and that's what the plan says, then I frankly don't see the need for the emergency provision because it's already covered in the construction mitigation plan. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Councilwoman Janik and then Councilwoman Whitehead.
What I wanted to speak on was the fact that I think the construction mitigation plan is necessary, and I believe it will facilitate the business owners who have a whole lot to lose if the streets are closed down, as we have seen with other businesses. And I applaud the people who work towards that construction mitigation plan, both Mr. Barry as well as the businessmen in the area. Now, I just want to make sure when Councilwoman Littlefield spoke, she further clarified that any hazardous situation could also be addressed. And I'm still a bit confused on where that is and what we're speaking about now. And I would hope that Sherry perhaps could clarify that a little bit more for me. Is there another part of this plan that talks about hazardous situations? Because for me, I don't want it to become an emergency. I want to deal with it as a hazardous situation where then there is a power to make adjustments to traffic and parking. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may answer her question, Sherry Scott, the construction mitigation plan is an exhibit to the development agreement, and it provides that the streets and the parking shall remain open. It says changes to this plan will only be made in accordance with section 6.10 of the development agreement. So when you look at 6.10, that is the language we're talking about. Do you want to keep it as it currently is, which gives the city the ability to make changes to the construction mitigation plan only if there's a health, safety, or other public interest concern that arises during construction? Or do you want to change it to allow that only in a true emergency? The amendment that you have on the floor is defining an emergency pursuant to Chapter 47, which is your streets, sidewalks, and public works chapter. And as Councilwoman Littlefield has previously read, it defines emergency to mean a sudden, unexpected event that may create an imminent risk of injury or death to any person, or an imminent risk to public health or safety requiring an immediate response. So it does allow for some interpretation, but it has to be something unexpected that's imminent. It wouldn't allow for a closure, for instance, just for a traffic backup if motorists are honking and trying to figure out how to go. And I don't think that's an imminent risk to public health or safety requiring an immediate response. So where that tipping point is, there'll be a smaller amount of discretion than what's currently in the documents. And that's about as much specificity as I can give you on how we would implement that type of wording if the development agreement were to change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilwoman Whitehead, then Councilwoman Littlefield. We do have a motion on the floor that we're going to vote on. So Councilwoman Whitehead, and then Littlefield.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased that there seems to be a lot of support for this great project up here on the dais. We never know going in, so I don't think there's any threat to this project getting approval, and that's really exciting for our downtown. So tweaking words is what we do to get things just right, and it's, I guess the phrase that comes to mind is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I guess I'm not comfortable with just the emergency. It seems to me, and I'm not looking at the legal definitions, that health and safety covers, similarly covers emergency and hazardous, which was what I had originally requested. And it seems to me that the phrase of concern is public interest. So I wonder, we want to make sure that we're not dealing with an emergency, but we're preventing an emergency. And the example that our city attorney keeps providing is an example of a safety issue. So if all of a sudden traffic is backing up, it seems to me we're going to open a road, but however that might close a road, that would fall under safety. So I would make an alternate motion. Well, I would like the city attorney to answer, is health and safety more or less emergency and hazardous?
Mayor, if I may answer her question.
Yes.
No, it's not. That's why we put in the documents to accommodate health, safety, or other public interests. That includes an emergency. Health, safety, or other public interest includes an emergency. An emergency doesn't include health, safety, or other public interest.
Got it. My question, I'm not comfortable with the word emergency, but the word that I had proposed in my initial remarks was hazardous, because a hazardous condition might be there's a gas line, so you want to clear off parking cars in the parking lot adjacent to where the gas line is being worked on. That's a hazardous condition. So to me, that also sounds like health and safety. So I guess I have stated that I don't support the emergency only change, and the words I was considering were I was going to substitute emergency and hazardous, but I feel comfortable that health and safety covers it if we removed public interest.
Well, in my ruling here, we have an amendment to what was presented to the public, and we can vote that up or down, and then whether that stays the same or the next motion carries. Now, you're asking to change a word, and I'm trying to clarify that we know what path we're on here. So I don't hear a motion. We do have one motion already as to how it's, if you're not comfortable with it, then you could, let's say, vote no on that.
Well, I would like to make perhaps a friendly amendment for Councilwoman Littlefield to consider, and that would be to retain the health and safety, but remove the public interest, knowing that health and safety cover both emergency and hazardous.
Okay, my whole point on this whole thing was to align the city's codes with each other. I think that would be fine. You know, the motion does not affect the terms of the contract itself in any way. This is strictly within the city and our own ordinance and our own terms for how we behave, not how the developer behaves. And its attempt to clearly define our own mitigation policy and put it into practice. And to put it into practice with our city's actions. So to the businesses that are going to be affected by this project for 3 years, they want assurance that they are going to be able to get to their businesses, that their clients are going to be able to get to their businesses, and without impediment. So the only reason that they wouldn't be is if there's a danger to health and safety. Now, you could take the word hazard out, but to me, that just kind of defines health and safety in this. If there's a line that's blowing up, a gas line or something, that's hazardous to me, but it's also health and safety. So, either way you want to put it, that's fine. I believe it will help to alleviate the fears in many businesses right now that we're not going to be capricious. We're not going to do this just on a whim because we feel like it's a good day to close the streets. But this is a city action, and this is assurance to our businesses that are in that area, holding businesses and wanting their customers to come to their businesses, that we will not be capricious and that we will only do these kinds of actions if there's a true danger to them and to their businesses. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Well, do you accept that word change? Because then the second would have to, and I hear some misgivings, so again, do you want to accept that? And then it'll have to be reread. The definition of hazard also should be, so I'm going to call, you do accept it. Does a second accept it, Betty? I'm sorry, Councilman Janik. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to need to reread it, and so we're very clear on the action we're taking. City Attorney?
Yes. So the way I understand the amendment, the motion to amend, which was the subject of a friendly amendment, the relevant wording in section 6.10 of the development agreement will now read, the city manager or designee shall have the authority to make adjustments to the CMP, the construction mitigation plan, as may be reasonably necessary to accommodate any health, safety concerns that may arise during construction, period. And the rest of that paragraph will remain unchanged in section 6.10 of the development agreement. Did I get that correctly? Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we have the revised amendment to what was published. As stated, there are 3 council people wanting to speak. Councilmember Millhaven, Councilwoman Littlefield, are you back? And then Whitehead. So I have Millhaven next.
Thank you. We've heard from the city attorney that she has significant concerns about modifying the language for this section. I don't know that it's our responsibility to wordsmith stuff. I think we would be well served to listen to the advice of the city attorney. I think the intention of all the parties here is to not close the road and to not close the parking. I mean, I think everybody's made that perfectly clear. And if I were the city manager, I'd think twice or 10 times before I went to close a parking space or to close this street, given the desires of the city council as well as the desires of the folks here in this room. So I don't think we're at risk of any capricious closings. But I do think we're at a risk if we are, according to the city attorney, narrowing what the city manager could do, because there may be unintended consequences. There may be something that may be in the public's best interest that would avoid a hazard or an emergency, and I don't think narrowing that is really in the best interest. So I'm going to make an alternate motion to adopt ordinance number 4535, adopt resolution 13926, and resolution 12397 as presented.
Second.
Well, it's my opinion that that's a base motion. I think there's an amendment we can vote on first because it was proposed as an amendment to what was published. The alternate motion would have to be significantly different than what has already been posted. It's not an alternate, it's a base motion. It's just, you could proceed after this happens. I think that, again, an alternate would be significantly similar. Well, it's a base motion to approve the case, and that's not an alternate motion. We have a motion to amend something. So that's my opinion, that we have an amendment. She proposed it as an amendment to it. And there has not been a basic motion made yet. So we were clarifying a certain provision in the motion. I see Councilmember Durham. I'm not saying we won't vote on the amendment. I'm just saying in order that it needs to be in order as it came forward. Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm opposed to the amendment because this project is going to last for 3 years. There are any number of unforeseeable things that might happen that would require some closings, temporary, whatever, that might be in the public interest. We can't, sitting here today, we can't imagine what those might be over the next 3 years. As the city attorney has stated, we do have an obligation to keep the roads and open. And so I would rest on that, on our obligation to keep the roads open and on the discretion of the city government to determine when it might be necessary, because sitting right here, we can't predict what circumstances might arise. So I would want to leave that to the discretion of city management on whether or not a temporary closing might be necessary. Thank you.
So I call the question. That means we'll be voting on the amendment first. And
Excuse me, I'd like to make a point of order.
You know, it's easier to do it this way, Linda, but, you know, it doesn't mean, okay, you want to question my point of order as to voting on this. I believe we should vote on the amendment, and therefore a vote yes would allow the chair to vote in order of the amendment. And a vote no would say the amendment would not be valid, I guess, until after the main motion, because we're going to vote on the amendment one way or the other. It's still an amendment. A yes would allow the order of things to be voted on.
If I could clarify. So we have an amended motion on the floor, and we have an alternate motion on the floor. And the rules of procedure call to vote on the second motion before we vote on the first motion.
Okay, then it will go down because it's
Sure,
not
that's
been
fine.
clarified,
I'm just saying that
because
rules-
the vote on we've had an hour discussion on an amendment, and it's still a valid amendment. Now, the chair has been questioned. I believe that the amendment should be voted on, up or down, however it goes. And if you agree, then vote yes. Register your vote.
Can you explain that again one more time?
Well,
Sorry.
she's questioning
asking
my
council to
judgment
override the
about
rules of
whether or
procedure.
not, and I am saying that we have to vote on an amendment. It was not a base amendment. And the question is substitute or alternate motion. Go ahead, City Attorney.
Mayor, thank you. I think the confusion here is the motion started out as a motion to amend, and then it became a friendly amendment. But it's still a motion to amend that needs to be voted on. And Councilwoman Millhaven is absolutely correct that it's last in, first out. But I do believe because there is a motion to amend, so we know what the two motions on the floor are, that it would be appropriate for council to vote on the motion to amend, and then it would be, if that motion is amended, then it will go to Councilwoman Millhaven's motion, which is an alternative motion, and then if that fails, then you would vote on the motion to amend. I'm sorry, the amended motion.
Thank you. To be clear, voting on the amendment, which had a friendly change.
If you don't vote on a friendly amendment.
Register your vote.
Oh, wait a minute. What are we voting on again?
Yes.
Okay.
Betty voted yes, and I vote. No. So the amendment did not pass, and we are now having a motion to approve the case as presented and stated, with flexibility for the city manager to handle the unforeseeable future. However, I will speak to the motion, and including several questions that I have. First of all, so the motion on the table is really a base motion to approve the project. There's many things to like about this project, and there's several things that I object to. First of all, the open space and that requirement is a positive, but it's also the rite of passage when you upzone. When you upzone, we expect some open space. We expect open space on the corners. It's also part of the architectural guidelines. It's useful, and it's not a give me. And then certainly, if a project had no open space, it wouldn't be approved from my end. The second fact is that we are in the process of retooling the Old Town Character Area Plan. I think the guidelines that are set, also architectural guidelines, have to be consistent with the project. And so certain things can be learned, lessons learned project by project. The three questions I have, first of all, relate to the percent of mixed use. And less than 1% of a so-called mixed-use project doesn't work. I can't support a project which is not truly mixed use. And I'm saying that because I believe that the client or the applicant said that there's maybe 14 or 15 extra spaces in this project, which sounds good. I think that should be for commercial space. There's, I think, 10 or 15 spaces that are surplus spaces, but I don't believe it's ideal to have people's patio right there along Indian School, and that's an opportunity lost in terms of having a true mixed use. So I think that the extra spaces, so-called overparked, should be in the commercial sector. I know that they have a small use for an office. The other thing that I have Mr. Berry up and the architect too. So if you look at the west elevation of both buildings, you'll see that they have a zero lot line, okay? Zero lot line abutting Mr. Miller's property and abutting the coach house property. And when you go and build a building that's 40 feet down into a hole, you cannot build on a zero lot line. Now, there is a view of that west view, of the west end of the building. Maybe we can find it and put it up. It shows balconies and some glass on the zero lot line. That doesn't meet code. It means that you have to have respect. That's some form of mitigation, I guess, to the adjoining property. And essentially, during construction, you couldn't fence that area off without invading or going on to the adjoining property if you want to build to zero lot line. So part of what we're seeing tonight is an upzoning with a lot of good considerations, but it has two weak points: the west side of both those buildings, and one of them shows glass, and I know it may be conceptual, but nevertheless, it's zero lot line. Essentially, if somebody put their car in drive instead of reverse parking at the coach house, they'd end up in the hole. Doesn't work. That building needs to be at least 5 or 10 feet back from the property line just to build it, just to be able to build and go down and excavate. And so that is a deficiency in that building that is in type 2. And then if you look at the building also, which is where the parking garage is, on First, it also is at zero lot line with windows showing on the west, which you can't do. And again, you'd be building on somebody, it just physically can't be done. There has to be either a respectable space there, or you're going to put the building in jeopardy next door. That's a hazard. That's a known hazard that's going to happen. So in that respect, I think I cannot approve the site plan that's presented. It's a beautiful building, but it doesn't have, and it could be zoned all the way to the lot, the zero property line, but it's not going to, I can't approve it that way. It's kind of like ethically something you don't do. You have to have some space, and they even showed some balconies. The tandem parking that's down in the basement, our council approved that. I suggested it. That allows the two-bedroom to have one parking space in tandem parking. That was a saver. It made it better for you all to provide two-bedroom units. I thought that was really good. The suggestion that I have, again, is that it's not meeting the mixed use. If we kept doing this, we're going to eat up commercial space, especially on Indian School. It looks like you have a parking on the back side of that building along Indian School that really should be for commercial purposes before it gets to be less than 1% is commercial, and they call that, mixed use. Therefore, when you start converting all these C2 properties, a minimum would be, I've asked for 20% the ground floor. I really think the ground floor should be commercial and let the other happen above it. So it would set a bad precedent for me to approve something when I know that the intent of the architectural guidelines and our true mixed use has to have some compatible commerce to it. You don't want people walking around there and seeing someone with a TV as you're out there walking and shopping or whatever. It's just not comfortable, and it breaks the rules. I don't see any other comments on the motion. I'm not hearing, is your client at all interested in moving back so that actually this can be built? Because I think that's the greatest hazard to this project.
Mayor Ortega, members of the council, I have to just pause for a second and note that there are numerous buildings throughout the city, not just in Scottsdale, but around the valley and around the country and I'm not an engineer or structural engineer, that build on a zero lot line and find a way to ensure that the adjacent property owner and the work site are safe. We do have a letter from Paul Kohler, who's PK Structural Engineering, has been around forever, has offices around the country, who, in great engineering detail, which I won't bore you with, I'd be happy to put the letter up if you'd like, that describes a couple of methods to be able to do that, one of which was in fact used by the city out here at the construction of the bridge over the reconstruction of the bridge out in front of City Hall, connecting the Civic Center Plaza. So I appreciate your experience very much as an architect and your involvement in many of these very complex projects around the valley and the country. But the information that certainly our client has garnered from their structural engineers and folks that engage in this around the country is that it certainly is possible to do this. The other isuso the short answer is our client is confident that we can. If for some reason we can't do it safely without hazard, then we won't do it. The city won't let us do it. So they've got to permit it, and this is not the first time they've dealt with underground parking or a structure above an underground parking on a zero lot line. So I very much honor and respect what you're saying, and if we can't do it, for goodness sakes, we won't.
I see any other comment from Ms. Janik? There's no other questions for Mr. Berry, so you can sit down. So we have a motion. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? I think many prepared statements were made. Otherwise, we have a motion and a second, and in particular for all the attendant development agreement and so forth for case 5A, please register your vote. Okay. And
This is Councilwoman Janik. I'm a yes.
okay, great. 5-2 passes. Congratulations. Good luck with your project.